Liz Truss has resigned as Britain's Prime Minister after a disastrous 6-week tenure. She will be the UK's shortest-serving leader ever, with another Conservative Party leadership election due to take place next week. Scott Lucas, professor of political science and international studies at the University of Birmingham, joins us live. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. A leadership contest will be held in the coming week. Names mentioned include Ms. Truss's former leadership rivals, Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt. Ben Wallace's name has also been thrown in. Who do you think has the strongest chance?
Well, I wouldn't want to say who will win, but what I can tell you are the situation as it stands right now is that Ben Wallace, who's been a very capable defense minister, is unlikely to stand. I think he'll remain in his current post, especially because of the crisis around the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Rishi Sunak will stand. He, of course, had the support of most Conservative MPs in the summer, but lost to Liz Truss in the vote amongst Conservative members. Penny Mordaunt, who amidst the calamity and the incompetence in the Conservative Party has actually been pretty reliable. She was third in the contest this summer. I think she will run. There will be some upstarts like Suella Braverman, who just resigned as Home Secretary yesterday, and Kemi Badenoch, who will campaign against woke culture, whatever that means. But the real joker, and I do mean joker, is that any circus needs a clown. And Boris Johnson, who left in disgrace only 2 months ago after a series of personal and political scandals, after lying to the House of Commons, he is going to come back from vacation and try to stand and get back into 10 Downing Street.
Professor, the Conservative Party are rather divided at the moment. Do you think that they'll be able to unite around one candidate?
I think that's a great question, because what we saw is that the Conservative Party has been moving further and further right, even hard right. But that hard right experiment was a disastrous failure under Liz Truss. The idea of just simply cutting taxes without saying how you'll fund the tax cuts. The ideas of rolling back national insurance duties that were meant to fund social care and health care. That has flopped. So having done that, will the party continue to be very hard right, very ideological, or will it come back to the center and be very pragmatic? And that is really the fight for the soul of conservatism, because I must be honest with you. I think the future of the UK is in doubt, given the economic crisis is the worst in at least 50 years. And I think the future of the Conservative Party is in question in terms of the idea of, can they be the responsible adults in the room rather than just simply shouting Brexit and shouting Project Fear when the reality of economics hits them in the face.
Scott, as you say, the Conservative Party's fate also hangs in the balance. Now, the Lib Dems, Labour and SNP are pushing for a general election to be called immediately. Now, the current Parliament is not set to dissolve until December 2024. What would need to happen for an early election to be called?
A miracle, because the Conservative Party will not hold an early election at this point. On current opinion polling, if you held the election today, out of 650 members of Parliament, Labour, the main opposition party, would have 411. The Tories would only have 135. The worst result for the Conservatives in at least a quarter of a century. So if the Tories are not going to call a vote because they know they will lose it, the only way to force an early vote is if they suffered no confidence, a defeat of no confidence in Parliament. And of course, because they still hold the majority in Parliament, there's no way they're going to defeat the government and force it into an election in which many Conservative MPs would lose their seats.
Now, whoever the next PM will be, what major challenges lie ahead?
Well, I think the key thing for me is that the economic problems, you might even say the crisis in the United Kingdom, predated the Truss government. this was not just a case of the pandemic. This was not just a case of global circumstances. This was the harm inflicted by Brexit in limiting UK trade opportunities, in limiting UK investment opportunities, in limiting investment coming into the country, in causing the problem over the status of Ireland. We were already going into recession before Liz Truss took office. We already had the highest inflation for more than 40 years before she went into number 10. And the situation is the same with this addition. Because of the disastrous mini budget, there is a £40 billion black hole in the budget, tax cuts that are still there that are not funded. So you either have to borrow more money, which will raise interest rates, which will raise the cost of mortgages, or you have to cut social services, health, education, housing, transportation. There are no good options for the Conservatives, given the mess that they've put us into. So I think a UK in recession next year, a UK which has been cut adrift from its major market in Europe, the Conservatives' best hope, and this is really horrible to say, is that they actually lose the next election, hand the economic problems off to Labour, and hope that Labour fare even worse.
Scott, thank you very much for your insights. Scott Lucas, Professor of Political Science and International Studies at the University of Birmingham. Now let's get a reaction from the EU to Liz Truss's resignation as Rosie Bishar joins us live from Brussels. Rosie, how has the EU leaders who are meeting today reacted to the news of Ms. Truss's resignation?
Well, the news of Liz Truss's resignation broke literally as the leaders were arriving into this summit. I was part of the crowds of journalists that are there shouting questions, and just suddenly all of our phones lit up. There was a sort of collective intake of breath, and we had to immediately start asking these leaders what their reaction to this was. They were put on the spot. Now, their reactions ranged from what I sensed was a sort of I told you so attitude. So, for example, Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel said that he quipped that he doesn't know if he'll remember now how many British Prime Ministers he has outlived in office. And he also said that he thought Brexit, the UK leaving the European Union, was a mistake. But there was also some quite sincere concern because the UK is, despite not being a part of this bloc, still a very important economic partner and a partner as these countries pledge to keep up support for Ukraine. Take a listen to what some of the leaders had to say.
Ensuite, je veux dire que la France, en tant que nation et peuple ami du peuple britannique, souhaite avant tout la stabilité. Et dans le contexte que nous connaissons, qui est un contexte de guerre, un contexte de tensions énergétiques et de crise plus large, il est important que la Grande-Bretagne retrouve très vite une stabilité politique. Et c'est tout ce que je souhaite. Mais à titre personnel, je suis toujours triste de voir partir un collègue, et une collègue en l'espèce. Et ce que je veux dire, c'est que je souhaite qu'il y ait cette stabilité qui puisse revenir au plus vite.
I sympathise with her. I think it's been a very difficult time for the British Prime Minister, given all that has happened and so on. And then, therefore, I think what's important as Britain's nearest neighbour, we have significant economic and relationship and many other relationships with the United Kingdom. I think stability is very important, and we would like to see the UK system within its capacity to be in a position to have a successor selected as quickly as possible, and that stability will be brought to the situation.
A call for stability. Now, it's quite normal to hear EU countries call stability in other nations which might be war-torn or embattled in all sorts of other crises. It's not something we'd usually hear them say about the United Kingdom, but in this case, this is the message from EU leaders. They would like to see stability restored in their neighbour across the Channel, the United Kingdom.